We are live. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'm so excited to have you on because we get to talk to amazing women on the show. And it is so cool to actually have somebody who we get to work with as an influencer. I know we worked with you on a number of different campaigns over the years. And I think one of the things I keep getting asked about is building influence as it relates to your job. I mean, how do you think about building influence? And everyone now, whereas maybe a few years ago, nobody was thinking from a business standpoint, oh, I should have a social media presence. I should be doing this. But now, fast forward to 2022, and it is a topic of conversation in a big way. So I am delighted to have you as an expert who really understands how to build a social media presence because you are social media influencer, you've built that presence. Can you talk about when you got started and how you got started?
Absolutely. I have been in it for quite a while. I actually was just doing the math, and this is totally going to age me, but I think I've been doing this for half my life. I started in the year 2000, believe it or not, before it was even a thing. I don't even think we called it blogs back then.
No.
I've just always been sort of an early adopter when it comes to technology and such. And so it all started for me back in the day with LiveJournal. And so from there, I really built a presence. And then with that, I just changed with the trends. And over the years, that evolved into Instagram, which I've always had a passion for photography and really just capturing memories. I'm a very nostalgic person. I love capturing those moments and keeping them forever on Instagram and sharing them with people. So Instagram is really where it really turned for me. And it's just been a fun way to not only share my life, but connect with others that normally I would never have met.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. And so you've basically been in this before it was, I mean, well before it was called influencer, before you were called an because that didn't even happen until probably more like 2015, I think is when lots of other companies started to, or people started to refer to people who, like you, who built social media presence as a social media influencer. So here we are, and you have been in it for a long time. What do you think is one of the biggest things that you've seen that is different today than maybe it was back in 2010, which is already, you were 10 years into it in 2010. So what's different today than just, back in 2010?
Yeah, I'm in this unique situation to where I've been doing this. It just happened organically. It wasn't something where a lot of influencers today, they decide I want to be content creators and they have this really great skill and they can hone that and then build their audience from there. For me, it happened just naturally over time. And so I remember getting my very first free product, for example. And I would say that was in 2012, I would say. And then from there, it evolved into some really small partnerships. And it was sort of mind blowing back in that early time, thinking, I'm going to get paid to do this, to take a picture, something that I love to do anyway. This is fantastic. And at that time, it wasn't a mainstream thing. In fact, it was seen as something very negative. It was very hard to get the feedback from my followers who had trusted me over this long period of time. And all of a sudden I was trying to sell them something, it felt like, to a lot of them. So there was a lot of adjustment on my end as well as it was on my followers end. And it was difficult because there's a lot of negative feedback back then. But I think over the time, especially in the last, I would say, 3 or 4 years or so, it's just such a norm now. It's just as normal as seeing a commercial on the TV. And so people not only are okay with it now, I think a lot of times they appreciate it even, which has been really fun for me because I've been able to do so much more with that. And then also still keep those followers engaged and not annoyed by my content and such.
Well, you have a really cool story as it relates to a brand, a retailer in particular, with CVS. Can you talk the now healthcare company, but back in the day was like a pharmacy drugstore, right? Where That's how I certainly
Right.
remember it. Can you talk about the experience with CVS and how that landed you on the Today Show?
Yeah, this is really what catapulted me into more of a influencer category. And I will say, you know, my number of followers is pretty small when you think of a lot of influencers out there, but I think that small can sometimes be very mighty. That those that do follow me are pretty active and engaging in my content, and I appreciate that. I get comments all the time of, I've been following you ever since the CVS days. And I really appreciate that anytime I hear it, because what happened was my daughter, who is actually just turned 11, she was turning 4, and she was obsessed with CVS. Like, this was not a partnership. It was not sponsored in any way. And I ended up, she wanted a CVS birthday party. So I had to get creative, because when you know that never happened before.
I mean, wait, I have to stop you for a second.
Right.
Your 4-year-old daughter
Yes.
was obsessed with CVS, the pharmacy / drugstore.
Yes, we never had one. So I live in Fayetteville, Arkansas, in Northwest Arkansas, and our city got its first CVS. And at the time, she was going to a Montessori daycare, and it was being built. And every day to and from school, she saw it go from like dirt to a building. And the day it opened, we went, and she was able to get, I'll never forget, strawberry milk and candy. And so that is just what she associates it with. And so she just always, and we would still pass it coming home from school, always wanting to stop at CVS. So we ended up getting to know the manager there. He changed the sign on her birthday for her, for the day of her party. And I posted it on my blog, and BuzzFeed picked it up, and then it just went crazy. It just spread like wildfire, and it was a whirlwind. It was truly going viral. The Ellen Show called. We didn't make it on. We still tell the funny story how she bombed her Ellen interview with the producer. But we had
your daughter?
Yes. And she regrets, she had no interest at the time because she was 4, but now she is like, oh man, I really wish I could have been on Ellen, but she was not interested in Ellen. She was 4, exactly.
You know, I know we have so much expectation from our kids these days that, hey, you're digital natives, you should all kind of figure this out. But 4 is like a little young.
A little young, yeah. And she just had no interest in that interview. I'm like, well, what can you do? So it still was exciting, and she loved the attention. She's still sort of known as the CVS girl around town. But my followers tripled from that, and so I was really able to just build content and keep that engagement going from that. And of course, CVS, that was a very limited time, but it's been fun to build from that. And we've had a lot of awesome opportunities that have come.
Well, and it was also an entree for you, where you do have your daughter in a lot of your content. I think, in fact, I believe we worked with you on a campaign for Hershey, and your daughter was in that content. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, now she's 11. Mm-hmm. How does she feel about all of this? And does she, it sounds like, you know, since she is in your content, she enjoys being in it. What do you think she gets from it?
Yeah, it's such an interesting topic, because I know a lot of people try to protect the privacy of their children, and I 100% respect that. Obviously, that's not the path that I went through when it came to sharing my life online. And these are conversations we've had since she was able to have them, because it's been a part of her life the entire time. And so as she's grown, our conversations have evolved in the ways that we explain it to her. And now she is active in it. Anytime that she's in any of my ads, she gets paid. I pay her. And then sometimes when she is not in them, she is actually my photographer, and she gets paid for that too. So she's actually loving it. And now she's still too young for social media herself, but she's able to see kind of behind the scenes of not only the work that goes into it, because it is a lot of work. Mm-hmm. She's able to see what we are able to get from that as a family as well. And I try to explain this. A lot of trips that we've gone on, for example, I've done some travel influencing, like, okay, this is work, but this is our payment. And, you know, if she's ever not comfortable with it, she does not have to participate. So, but so far she's loving it.
Yeah. Well, and she's learning amazing skills at such a young age. Like to understand how to take photos, to understand how to tell a story in terms of the content that is going to serve her well in so many other areas of her life. Just that ability to understand, okay, how do I convey a message
Yes.
just to an audience? I mean, there is such a skill to doing that well in terms of, and I think that's one of the big differences that we tend to see in people, in creators and influencers who kind of go the distance, is that they are able to do that. They're able to effectively tell a story that people are open to hearing. And that is, I think, one of the key things. And you're teaching her those skills at such a young age. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's what she'll even one of her favorite things to do, and this is really popular, I think, with just kids her age, or to take videos, not necessarily to post them on social media, but there's Instagram style, YouTube style, even TikTok style videos of just sharing them with her friends. And yes, to learn that, I think is awesome. I don't know if she would ever want to go down the track of being an influencer or not, but having just the ability to do that. I mean, kids are learning everything early these days. And so it's just, I think as long as you look at the positive aspects of it, it can really serve them well.
Right. Well, and also as long as the child is fine with being a part of that process.
Yeah.
I think it's more difficult when you have parents or you have influencers who are sharing about their children, and their children really prefer for them not to. And this is also something we've seen, this evolution. I mean, talk about, you've been in this space for so long, but I think there has been a recognition now that we're so deep into it. And right, there are people who've been doing this as creators for years, and they are at a point where they're starting to think through, or they've been thinking through, all right, is this something that's like, would I want my kids to see this when they're 10 years down the road or 20 years down the road? Is this something that I want them to be seeing? And I think there is a recognition of that now, that maybe in the beginning, there wasn't the awareness.
There wasn't, because this was all so brand new. It was new territory. And now I'm seeing a big trend in the jobs that I receive is a lot of times children are not allowed to be in it, or there's very specific rules about that. And I 100% understand why. But of course, if it's children content, then obviously that's allowed. But there's usually some strong rules around that. And I like that we're thinking of that now.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little about one of the things that I find so valuable about working with people like you who built their social media presence and understand, are constantly posting whatever the content is that in some ways, I think influencers, or creators, whatever you want to refer to that category as, they have a better understanding frequently about how to talk about a product or service to their audience than the brand that creates that product or service, right? Because you're engaging with your audience every day. You create content, you push it out. As you said, you have an engaged audience. They're commenting, they're liking, they're sharing, they're talking to you effectively about what they like and what they don't like in terms of what you're saying. And you can't help but learn from that, right? Learn, okay, I now understand how to talk to this audience. Can you talk a little bit about that experience and how engaging with your audience and building this audience over time and engaging with them, what that has taught you in terms of like being an influencer and in really a marketer in some regards, right? If you can understand how to talk to your audience about that product or service better than the person who's the marketer at the brand, that's a huge feat. And I see that so often when working with influencers, that they just get it. They get how to do it So can you talk a little bit about that experience of understanding your audience and then how you think about talking with them when you get a new assignment?
Absolutely. I think the key is to always accept partnerships that actually are a good fit. Because I get ones all the time where it's just like, this would not fly with my audience. It wouldn't make sense. So the ones that I do accept are usually brands that I already love or already use or already am very familiar with. And so I think it has to be natural, first of all. And one of the things that I think brands at first were sort of struggling with was trying to control the message that the influencer says and trying to dictate what the images look like. For example, you cannot use any filters because we want the logos to be exactly right. I get that, but a little wiggle room so that it feels authentic and natural to the influencer's feed is highly important. So having them be able to trust us to deliver the message from a way where we use the product, how we enjoy it, how we know that maybe the other moms that follow me might be curious to know. And I think that over the time, it really has been evolving pretty quickly and just from my perspective, at least, on how brands control all of the rules of how to create that content. And I feel like it's sort of lately, my projects have been a little bit more lenient and I've had a little bit more creative freedom, which has been really awesome because once you allow the influencer to do that, that's when you're going to get that engagement because that's people who follow me are usually women just like me. They're moms. They're in their 30s or 40s, and we talk to each other. And so with brands, you sometimes get stuck in the details, and we like to just show the product for how we relate to it.
You know, one of the things I would love to get your perspective on this because I started my career on the brand side, you know, as a marketer at a brand, and based on that experience, I can say it is so easy to get caught up in like the product, like the features of the product when you work on it, that, you know, you almost lose the real value of a message that you can deliver. And one of the things I find with influencers is that because, as you just said, like you are similar frequently to the audience that's following you. So if a brand has correctly chosen you, let's say to do a sponsored post for them, then you have the audience that they're looking for, right? The target for that product. And I think there's a huge value in the way that like an influencer thinks about it, because you also could very well be the target for that product, like one of the customers of that product, right? So I have found that influencers are so good at not being caught up like the marketer at the brand is in like the features, but you are more focused on, okay, what's the benefit of this product? What is it that my audience is going to really enjoy about this product that makes their life better, easier, more interesting, whatever that is. But that's the thing that I find so powerful about working with influencers, because on average, I think influencers understand their audience. They understand how to talk with them. And then by virtue of that, when you get a brand coming to you to do a sponsored post for them, you are able to focus on what is my audience going to find beneficial about this product. Can you give an example, if you can think of one recently, where you're creating a sponsored piece of content for a brand and you looked at it and thought, okay, this is how I think about it. And then by virtue of doing that thinking, all right, I know my audience, I know what this product is. How do I present it to them in a way that gets them excited about it?
Yeah, I think my biggest struggle is creating the product in a natural way while still adhering to all of the guidelines. If it were up to me, I would have it be almost like a free-for-all. Whenever I get a sponsored, this is very rare, sponsored opportunity to do that, it's so fun because then we're able to really make it our own, which makes it do so much better in my mind. So when I have to capture, these 5 products with in a certain, and then have the hero image, and it's all very, very specific, it narrows down the creative opportunities. And so in a way, it's sort of fun for me because it's a challenge. I'm like, well, how can I make this natural and fun? At the same time, I wish I had more free for all. But I know that that's probably not going to happen, especially in the world where I live, which is Walmart with Northwest Arkansas. I know there's very strict guidelines, but just being able to make it a natural fit and show things in our home being used without having to prop things up and showing all of the details. Because I know in my personal experience, all I have to do is, like, for example, is hear about if someone says a name of a restaurant for lunch. All of a sudden, I'm like, well, that's what I'm craving. And just because you don't get all of the details about this is the special meal and here's how much it costs and here's everything that comes with it, doesn't mean that you won't go there. And to me, I think just that visual and creating that creative visual for my followers is more valuable than any sort of details I could put in the comment.
I mean, I think that is such an excellent point. It's about getting the person to at the right time, but sharing what it is that and it's exactly what we were just talking about, sharing what you like about it so that it appeals to your audience. What do you think is the most important thing that brands or companies that hire influencers to work with them, what is the most important thing for them to keep in mind in order to have a successful post?
Yeah. Organization with what you're looking for is key, and working with companies like She Speaks is extremely valuable. And I'm not just saying that. I've worked with numerous platforms, and being organized in what they're looking for to make sure, like, upfront, is that a good fit? I would certainly say that is very helpful because it is a lot of work, like I mentioned earlier, not only for me, but also for those that are working in the campaign. And there's a lot of back and forth. And to know those expectations up front is really key. And then also I've spoken to let the influencer have that creativity. If there's any wiggle room, let the influencer have it, because we really get to do more with that. With the more strict guidelines that they're there, maybe the tighter our images are, and they're just not as natural of a fit in our feed.
Yeah. I think that is great advice in terms of like thinking, like focusing, like if you had to choose one thing when you're working with an influencer, make sure you're choosing someone who can credibly and authentically talk about your product. Because if it doesn't make any sense for them within their feed, it could backfire. It could have the exact opposite effect of what you're looking for. So I love that advice. How do you see the social platforms changing? I know that you've been in this business longer than we have, and we feel like we've been in this business a long time, but you've been influencing and active on social media from before it was even called social media. So how do you see the platforms today in terms of which one do you think is the most fun, and which one do you think is the most effective? If they're different, maybe they're one and the same, but which one do you like the most?
Instagram will always have my heart. I will say, of course, just like any other social media platform, it is changing. No one likes the algorithm. Everyone wants just who you're following chronological feedback. And I know there's an option for it, but it's just not the same. But I think that the nature of Instagram will always be where I find my home. I love that it really, not only I'm able to share my life, it captures my life as well. So I often will go back and just look at what I posted 10 years ago. And it's wild that my life is in those little squares, and it's provided me some amazing opportunities. But I've seen the platforms change tremendously. I mean, I started on the internet with CompuServe, AOL, and just evolved into LiveJournal, MySpace, Facebook, Instagram. And of course, now there's TikTok. And I have not migrated or even attempted to migrate any sort of my followers or concentration to any other platform except for Instagram and my blog. It's just, I work full-time too. This is not my full-time job. This is my creative outlet, and my little side hustle, I like to call it. But of course, TikTok is still my guilty pleasure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've heard that from so many people. Well, you just mentioned that you have this full-time work that you do as well. And I wanted to ask you, what do you see as the similarity, or are there similarities between building influence as a social media personality and building influence within a company? Are there any similarities there that you could share?
The company that I work for is very tiny. So the people that I work for have become some of my best friends. You know, I work with maybe 4 other people. So they all know what I do, but I feel like it gives me a perspective. It also gives a perspective of being able to just know how to talk to people. Because we do have meetings outside of the office and such, and I'm able to connect with people in a way that, you know, I may not have ever met before, kind of the same way that I do with Instagram.
Yeah.
But also, more than anything, it gives me that creative outlet. I've got my business mind when I go to work from 8 to 5 every day, but on the weekends, I'm able to concentrate here. And I think that both of those things help me do better with each other. And I think that is just, I think I would be so bored if I didn't have something else. So it works both sides of my brains. And I think that overall it's just beneficial, to make sure that I'm exercising my business mind, my creative mind, and be able to have fun and change things up.
Yeah. And, you know, I think I will say one thing that I think is really similar in what I've seen of like people who are really good at building influence on social media, when they interact with people in any business setting, one of the great values is that they understand how to tell a story. It's what we were talking about at the top of this conversation. You spend your time telling stories, and there is no more compelling thing, I think, in business in terms of influencing other people than being able to share a compelling story. And that, I think, is that's one of the things I see as such a benefit for anyone who does any kind of social media influence, to translate that into how do I influence at work.
Yeah, it provides this perspective that you normally wouldn't have. I feel like I actually look at the world a little different in a way, I have since I've been doing this, in a way of like, how can I capture this? How can I tell this? So it helps prepare me for those moments, maybe in a business setting where I'm not quite sure what to say or how something's going to go. And it keeps things personable as well. And I think that's really important, because we're all people doing our job.
Yeah. All right. My last question for you, Sarah. What do you wish you could tell the young Sarah that was just starting out?
Oh gosh, I would say, hold on, because it's about to get really cool. Younger me would not believe the things that I get paid to take photos of. You know, someone who didn't have a lot of money growing up, and someone who's been working since she was 15, and then a lover of photography, to know that I was paid, for example, to go to my hometown and visit it like a tourist is amazing. And being able to work with different brands that I grew up loving, that like my family grew up loving and using, is just incredible. I've been doing this for a while, but every time I get a sponsorship, I am just like, wow, this is really cool. So I never in a million years would have thought that one day this would be a job for me. And I think it's cool.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, thank you so much for spending this time with us. I am so excited to have people hear kind of a little bit of insight from you. As I said, I am a big believer that people who have been doing this as you have for years, they just have so much to share in terms of that skill of influencing. And there are so many ways you can use that. I mean, in your personal life and your professional life. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's always fun to talk about that. So thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure.